Hey there, future diplomats. I know you guys are out there deep in that UPSC prep, especially those of you brave souls tackling international
Yeah.
relations as your optional. Yeah, it's a beast of a subject. But hey, that's why we're here, right? To help you conquer it. And today, we're taking a deep dive into one of the, well, you could call him a titan of political thought, Immanuel Kant.
Ah, Kant.
Now, I know, some of you might be thinking, philosophy for IR.
Yeah.
Seriously. But trust me on this one.
Yeah, this is important.
Kant's ideas, they're not just some dusty old relics from the past. They're surprisingly relevant to understanding, like, the really complex stuff happening in international relations today.
It's fascinating. What's fascinating about Kant is that he offers this completely different lens for viewing the world,
Yeah.
especially, if you compare him to someone like, say, Hobbes.
Right, right.
Hobbes saw the world as this inherently chaotic place, just destined for conflict.
Yeah.
But Kant, he believed that peace, it wasn't just some pipe dream. It's actually like nature's ultimate goal.
Okay. That's a pretty bold claim.
Yeah.
So how did he get there? Was he just, like, wearing rose-colored glasses or something?
Not at all. Kant, he was deeply aware of the human capacity for conflict, let's say.
Right.
But he also believed in this power of reason and morality to guide us towards a more peaceful future. He even envisioned this like invisible hand
Oh.
guiding history towards this end, even if it means, kind of pushing through these periods of conflict to get there.
All right, there. All right. I'm starting to see why this is relevant for us IR enthusiasts. So you're telling me that centuries ago, Kant was already grappling with these huge questions, the questions that still keep us up at night, like, can we escape this cycle of war? Is lasting peace actually possible?
Exactly. And to answer those questions, Kant, he gives us this blueprint, a set of conditions that he believes are absolutely necessary for achieving perpetual peace.
All right, lay it on me. What's this Kantian blueprint for a more peaceful world?
Well, first and foremost, Kant was a huge, huge proponent of Republican states.
Republican states, okay?
He believed that when citizens, when they have a say in their government, right, when they're the ones bearing the costs of war, they're much less likely to choose it. As a solution to these international disputes.
Hold on. That's a really interesting point. Is that where this whole democratic peace theory comes from?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
idea that democracies are less likely to go to war with each other.
Hmm.
Because I know that's a huge debate in IR. It's something that comes up all the time on the UPSC exam.
You got it. Kant, he's considered like one of the intellectual fathers of that theory.
Right.
And, it's definitely been challenged, debated over the years, but it's still this cornerstone of liberal internationalist thought.
Okay, so republicanism, that's step one in Kant's peace plan.
Yeah.
What else did he have in mind?
Well, he took it a step further. He envisioned this world where these free republican states, they would come together in a federation, not a world government, mind you,
Okay.
but a voluntary association to ensure lasting peace.
So like a more permanent, more structured version of the alliances we see in the world today.
In a way, yeah. Think of organizations like the United Nations or the European Union.
Right.
They're not perfect embodiments of Kant's vision, but they do reflect that core idea of states coming together to achieve these common goals, especially peace and security.
And this emphasis on a federation rather than single world government, that was really important to Kant, wasn't it?
Absolutely. He was all about decentralized power. He believed that concentrating too much power in a single global entity, that could actually be detrimental to peace and freedom.
Okay.
For Kant, the key was to strike this balance between state sovereignty and international cooperation.
That tension between sovereignty and cooperation, that's something we see all the time in international relations, isn't it?
It's at the heart of so many global challenges,
Yeah.
whether it's climate change, pandemics, economic crises. The question always arises, how can states effectively cooperate without sacrificing their autonomy? And you can bet the UPSC examiners, they're going to be looking for you to engage with that question.
This is already giving me so many ideas for my next essay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got Republican states and a federation working together to keep the peace. What else is in Kant's toolbox for building a better world?
Well, this is where one of his most influential and sometimes misunderstood ideas comes in. Cosmopolitanism.
All right, break that down for me. What exactly did Kant mean by cosmopolitanism?
Essentially, he believed that we're not just citizens of our individual nations.
Okay.
We're also citizens of the world, bound by a shared humanity and universal moral principles.
So it's about recognizing that we have obligations to each other that extend beyond national borders.
Precisely. And that we have this shared responsibility to create a world that upholds the dignity and rights of all people, regardless of where they're from.
This is making me think about everything from human rights treaties to international aid efforts.
Mm.
Are those kinds of initiatives a reflection of Kantian cosmopolitanism in action?
They certainly can be seen that way. And it's important to understand that Kant wasn't just talking about, feel-good humanitarianism. He believed that cosmopolitanism was also essential for achieving lasting peace.
Right.
After all, if we recognize our shared humanity and interconnectedness, we're less likely to view those from other countries as enemies or threats.
You know, thinking about all of this in the context of the UPSC exam,
Yeah.
it strikes me that Kant's ideas, they provide this really powerful counterpoint to realism, which tends to focus on state self-interest and the inevitability of conflict.
That's a sharp observation, and it's exactly the kind of analytical thinking that the UPSC examiners are looking for, being able to compare and contrast different theoretical approaches to show how they explain, or fail to explain, world events. That's what sets apart the truly stellar answers.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've got Kant's big idea for perpetual peace, his belief in republican states coming together in a federation, and this fascinating concept of cosmopolitanism. But before we move on, I do want to address something that often comes up when discussing Kant, and that's his views on women and their role in society.
Yeah, it's true that Kant, despite being a champion of individual liberty, held some views that are, well, deeply problematic from a modern perspective. He believed that women were passive citizens, lacking the economic independence needed for full political participation.
And he went so far as to argue that the political subordination of women was actually justified.
Yes, and it's important to acknowledge that this is a highly debated aspect of his philosophy, but it's also something that the UPSC examiners might ask you about, so you need to be prepared to engage with those complexities, analyze his arguments, understand the historical context, and be able to present a balanced and critical perspective.
That's crucial. We can admire Kant's brilliance without shying away from the parts of his work that haven't aged so well.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is key. We need to be able to engage with all aspects of a thinker's work, even the problematic ones.
Okay, so now that we've laid the foundation with Kant's core ideas, let's shift gears and explore some of the critiques and debates that have emerged around his work. Because no thinker, no matter how influential, exists in a vacuum.
That's where it gets really interesting. Because by looking at how others have responded to Kant, both positively and negatively, we can gain an even deeper understanding of his ideas and their relevance to the world today.
And that's what we'll be doing in the next part of our deep dive, so make sure you stick around.
And in the meantime, if you're finding this discussion helpful for your UPSC prep, hit that subscribe button and give us a like. It really helps us reach more future diplomats like you.
We appreciate your support.
It's amazing to think about how Kant, writing back in the 18th century, was already grappling with issues that are like front page news today.
It's true. And speaking of grappling with Kant's ideas, let's dive into some of those critiques we mentioned. Who were some of the major thinkers who took issue with his vision of perpetual peace?
Well, one of the most common criticisms, and you'll see this reflected a lot in realist thought, is that Kant was just too idealistic, too optimistic about human nature. Realists, they argue that states will always prioritize their own self-interest, right? Their own security, even if it means resorting to conflict.
So they'd say that things like international cooperation and cosmopolitanism, they're all well and good in theory, but they don't really hold up in the, the cutthroat world of international politics.
Exactly. Realists would point to events like, say, the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine as evidence that power politics and the struggle for dominance are still very much alive and well.
That's a good point. But even if we acknowledge those criticisms, wouldn't you say there's still value in studying Kant? I mean, his ideas, they offer this framework for thinking about how we could build a more peaceful world, even if it seems like a distant goal.
Absolutely. And remember, the UPSC exam, it's not just about regurgitating facts.
Right.
It's about demonstrating critical thinking.
Oh, okay.
And that means being able to engage with different theoretical perspectives, to analyze their strengths and weaknesses, and to apply them to real-world situations.
So for you UPSC preppers out there, knowing Kant is great, but being able to spar with his ideas, to compare them to, say, a realist perspective, that's what's going to make your essays really stand out.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've talked about the realists. Who else had some bones to pick with Kant?
Well, even those who were sympathetic to Kant's goals often took issue with some of his specific arguments.
Huh?
For example, some thinkers, even those who supported democracy, question whether republics are really inherently more peaceful than other forms of government.
I can see why that would be a point of contention.
Yep.
After all, there have been plenty of democracies that have engaged in war, even with each other.
Precisely. And this gets to the heart of what makes IR so complex and fascinating. There are rarely easy answers, and that's why it's so important to engage with these debates, to be able to weigh different perspectives and form your own informed opinions.
Okay, I'm starting to feel like a real IR scholar here, but let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the critics, but what about Kant's legacy? How have his ideas influenced later thinkers and movements?
Well, his impact is undeniable. We've already mentioned the democratic peace theory, which has been hugely influential in both academic and policy circles.
Right.
But beyond that, his ideas about cosmopolitanism, about universal human rights, have shaped the development of international law and institutions like the United Nations.
So even if we don't live in a perfectly Kantian world, his ideas are kind of woven into the fabric of the international system.
Exactly. And that's why studying Kant is so crucial for you. As future diplomats and policymakers, his ideas provide a framework for understanding the ideals that many international institutions are striving for, even if they fall short in practice.
This is making me think about everything from international human rights law to efforts to address these global challenges, like climate change. Do you see Kant's influence in those areas?
Absolutely. The idea that we have a shared responsibility to protect human dignity and to work together to solve global problems, that has deep roots in Kantian thought. And it's a powerful counterpoint to that narrow, self-interested view of the world that we often see in realist thought.
So even centuries later, Kant's ideas are still very much alive in the world of international relations.
And not just in the halls of academia. His ideas have inspired activists, reformers, even revolutionaries who believe in the possibility of a more just and peaceful world.
You know, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive into Kant. I feel like I'm starting to see the world through a whole new lens.
And that's exactly the point. The more perspectives you can grapple with, the better equipped you'll be to analyze complex situations, to understand different points of view, and to come up with your own solutions to global challenges.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, let's bring this back to the UPSC exam. What are some key takeaways for our aspiring diplomats out there?
Well, first and foremost, remember that Kant is a must-know for anyone tackling the IR optional. His ideas about perpetual peace, Republicanism, Cosmopolitanism, those are all foundational concepts that you need to have a solid grasp of.
And don't forget to be able to connect those concepts to contemporary issues. The UPSC examiners, they love to see that you can apply your theoretical knowledge to the real world.
Exactly. So as you're studying Kant, ask yourself, how do his ideas help us understand current events like the conflict in Ukraine? What would his take be on the role of international organizations like the UN? How does his philosophy of cosmopolitanism inform our approach to issues like human rights or global poverty?
These are the kinds of questions that will not only impress the examiners, but also help you develop a deeper understanding of the complexities of international relations.
And of course, don't forget to familiarize yourself with the critiques of Kant's work. Being able to discuss those criticisms, to analyze different viewpoints, that'll really show the examiners that you're a critical thinker.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored Kant's key ideas, delved into some of the criticisms and debates around his work, and even started to connect his ideas to contemporary issues and the UPSC exam.
But there's still so much more to unpack. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll be exploring some specific examples of how you can use Kant's ideas to craft brilliant answers and essays for your exam.
So be sure to stick around for the final part of our Kantian adventure.
And while you're waiting, if you're finding this deep dive helpful for your UPSC journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like. It really helps us spread the knowledge and empower future generations of diplomats and policymakers.
We appreciate your support. All right, future diplomats, welcome back. Final leg of our Kantian deep dive. You've stuck with us through perpetual peace, republicanism, cosmopolitanism, the whole shebang. Now it's time to get practical.
Exactly. We've explored the ideas, but now let's talk about how you can actually use these ideas in your UPSC exam.
Right, and thank you for it.
Remember, those examiners, they're not just looking for a summary of Kant's theories.
Right.
They want to see that you can think critically, apply those theories to real-world situations, and even, engage with different perspectives.
So, okay, let's say you get an essay question about the effectiveness of the United Nations in promoting international peace. How could you, bring in Kant to make your answer really shine?
Well, you could start by discussing Kant's vision. of a federation of free states. Remember, he believed that states, while retaining their sovereignty, could come together in a voluntary association to achieve these common goals, particularly peace and security.
So you could kind of compare and contrast Kant's ideal federation with the structure and function of the UN,
Yeah.
highlighting both the similarities and the differences.
Exactly. You could explore the challenges the UN faces in balancing state sovereignty with the need for collective action, right? It's a dilemma that Kant himself recognized.
Yeah.
You could even bring in his ideas about cosmopolitanism and universal hospitality to discuss the UN's role in promoting human rights and addressing these global issues like climate change, refugee crises.
Oh, okay, this is starting to click for me.
Yeah.
It's not just about, name-dropping Kant. It's about using his ideas as a lens, right, to analyze these complex situations, to understand the motivations, the challenges, facing different actors on the world stage.
Precisely. And remember, the UPSC examiners, they love to see you engage with different perspectives. So you could even contrast Kant's optimistic view of international cooperation with the, more cynical perspectives of realists who emphasize power politics and the enduring nature of conflict.
For example, you could discuss how the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine challenges certain aspects of Kant's theory. After all, he envisioned this world where states, particularly republics, would choose diplomacy over war.
That's a great example. And it allows you to delve into some really meaty IR debates, right? Is the conflict in Ukraine a sign that Kant's vision is outdated? Or does it actually highlight the need for stronger international institutions and a more robust commitment to cosmopolitan principles?
See, these are the kinds of questions that get my brain firing. It's all about connecting the dots, seeing those historical ideas play out in the messy reality of current events.
And that's what makes studying IR so fascinating. And dare I say, even a little bit addictive.
All right, before we let our listeners go and conquer their UPSC exams, any final words of wisdom? What's the most important thing for them to remember about Kant?
I think the key takeaway is this. Kant gives you this powerful framework for thinking about the world, for understanding the motivations of states, for grappling with the big questions of war and peace. But don't treat his ideas as dogma, right? Engage with them critically, question them, challenge them, and most importantly, see how they connect to the world around you.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we want to give a huge shout out to all our listeners out there on this UPSC journey. It's not an easy path, but the rewards, they're immense.
We believe in you, and remember, we're here to support you every step of the way.
If you found this deep dive into Kant helpful, please hit that subscribe button and give us a like. It really helps us reach more future diplomats just like you.
And don't forget to share this episode with your fellow UPSC warriors. The more we learn, the more we understand, the better equipped we are to create a more peaceful and just world.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep those brain cells firing.